This podcast definitely needs an introduction because it was actually a video call that I was having with someone I would now call a friend who I just met last week. And then we decided, let's record this. This is a conversation because we just dive into it from the time that I hit record. This conversation is born out of me participating in a group training where a guest speaker was brought on to talk about sacred inclusion, talking about color, culture, race, and it opened a lot of stuff up for me and a lot of stuff that I haven't delved into before. And I was given a homework piece, which I delve into. I turned up to this group. I hadn't done my homework, but I loved the facilitated conversation that happened. And this was with a lady called Ava Glamaris. And I have invited her to come and speak to two of my ongoing coaching groups, my Embody group and my practitioner group, who are the Emerge Mastermind. And I wanted to bring them together. And it was really interesting organizing this on so many levels. And color, race is not something that I will openly talk about. I don't really have a strong stance on it myself. I am Chinese ethnicity, grew up in Australia. I don't identify as such as a person of color. And I'm going to apologize in advance if I offend anyone, but this is my truth and this is my version of what's going on for me. But as a result of inviting this guest speaker, who is not who I'm talking to on this podcast, but as a result of inviting this guest speaker to talk to my group to facilitate a conversation on sacred inclusion, I thought I better do the homework. So I actually watched the masterclass that was provided, and I remember sitting watching the facilitated conversation and how Ava introduced herself, and I thought it was just really beautiful, honoring where she grew up, her mother line, where they grew up, the original custodians of the land, the traditional name, etc. And the energy of it just felt really nice. Now, I sat on this for a good few months and I was just like, I don't even know where to start. And as a result of just wanting to bring this conversation to my group or groups, I thought I better do the homework. So I watched the masterclass and then I just got stuck. I got stuck with, I don't know where to start. And like, how do I find out? I'm from Australia. I now live in New Zealand and my parents grew up in Malaysia. I'm just like lost and I'm still lost for words. I don't know if I'm using the right words. And this is why I wanted to bring this podcast to you, because this is the early stages of my journey and acknowledging that this is somewhere where some of you might be. And I recognize that this is also where some people might be when they're delving into their emotional journey, just not really knowing where to start. But I know that this is just going to evolve. It's something that's piqued my interest, something that I want to put my energy into right now. And also this element of trusting that there are people out there to support me. So some of you know of Brock Martin, and he has been on the podcast before and is an amazing Aboriginal man. And we're friends and we connect regularly, but I've never spoken to him about this. And I reached out to him. I was like, Brock, I had to do it on a voice message because I was like, you're going to get the vibe that I don't know what words to use, but hopefully you get the gist of what I'm asking. So I said, can you help me? I've got this assignment project. It's not either of those. It's an area of interest that I want to delve into right now. And I would really love some help describing my origins of growing up in Australia. Who are the traditional landowners? I was saying things like custodians, stewards. I don't know what the right word is to use. And this is something that I would really love to delve into. And he was so open and it was really amazing. And we ended up jumping on a phone call, and halfway through he said, we should be recording this on a podcast. I'm like, oh yeah, missed the boat. So Jodie is someone that I connected with. She feels like a soul sister. I only met her last week to the day. She's been friends with my husband for many, many years. We talk a little bit about how we ended up connecting. And I said, oh, I've got someone helping with my Australian origins. And she felt like another safe person that who I could ask. She is a Māori woman. And I said, I need help with my New Zealand origins. And we had this amazing conversation, not my New Zealand origins, but honoring the space, the land, everything. And again, you can hear the hesitation in my voice because I just don't even really know what to say at this stage. So we started our conversation, which was not planned to be a podcast, but I said, let's hit record on this a few minutes in. So that's why I dive in, why I want to do a little bit of an intro so you get why we just get straight to the point, because this was not planned. My cleaner was in the background vacuuming. I don't know if you can hear her. And, there's a number of times where I said, I don't know if this is going to make it onto the podcast. Let's just see how this goes. So Jodie is helping me out. And what I love about her and the conversations that we had is I am seeing so many things intertwined, and I'm saying more and more, like business, personal life, family life, work with my animals. It's all intertwined. And I don't know if we described this in the podcast, I think we touched on it a little bit, is that the discussions that we're having in the position that I'm in, there's very similar stories that have nothing to do with culture, race, or color as well. And also, Jodie comes from a very kind heart, and we acknowledge that not everyone will come from this place. And this is, I guess, a level of a vulnerable podcast because, I've been doing my level of work I have for a while, and that's continuing to evolve, but you haven't seen a lot of the pain that I've been through. So this is the start of my journey of exploring culture, race, origins, and it's opening doors. And I'm very grateful to Brock and Jodie, and I hope to get them on a podcast together. And I hope you get something out of this. And there's going to be links in the show notes as well. So what is the context of me wanting to dive into this and describing where I live and where I'm from in New Zealand? Is that I was part of an inclusivity, sacred inclusion training, and I came very unprepared, and I didn't know, and I didn't do my homework to introduce myself in terms of where I was from, origins, custodians of the land. And then it took me a few months where I was like, oh, I have a lot of resistance. I don't know where to start. And so we met, my cleaner's vacuuming. I don't know if you can hear it.
I can't hear anything, but they're sort of doing a marvelous job.
And I realized I just felt very awkward. Like I didn't know where to start. And so serendipitously, we met at Gav's book launch. And then, you're like my safe person to connect with.
Yay.
And I've been connecting with Brock to find out my Australian roots and origins.
Cool.
And I have now invited this sacred inclusion speaker to speak to two of my groups and bring them together, and that raised a whole bunch of stuff of is this safe for us to mix groups, etc. And actually I'm going back and doing the homework that I didn't do 3 months ago, but I'm in a space of wanting to dive in.
Right.
And so I want to, I guess I have to lead my group, like, hey, I've done this.
Yeah,
it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I don't know what's coming up is we even when we were talking at Gav's book launch, what was coming up for me was remembering how I felt stepping back into the space again, because I learned when I was a child, then went back into the mainstream system, the Western system of I guess what that looks like, how we introduce ourselves, how we interact with each other, and then having to come back into this world, which actually felt better for me, but at the same time, it seemed so foreign to me as well. It was a real juxtaposition of there's something that's speaking to my heart right now, but at the same time, I'm resisting this, and I don't know what that is. So that was what was coming up when we're identifying a safe space to express who we are, connect with each other, respect the lay of the land and how things operate from this space in New Zealand or Aotearoa. And that resonated with me heaps. So I guess just prefacing anything I'm about to say with I am not the grandmaster. I don't speak for all Māori, but I am familiar with the space of being frightened, and being wanting to be respectful, not wanting to upset anyone. So that totally resonates with me.
Mm.
Um, and what I loved about our chat too was that, well, so many things, so many things, but uh, I was able to share with you some crucial advice that someone else had given me about, your speaking about who you are, what's important to you. It's going that next level deeper than just a surface layer of my name is Jodie Treanor. It's going to the layer of where have you come from, who loved you, when your ancestors first arrived here or wherever they're from, which river did they use to nourish you? Which mountain did they choose to be their landmark for where they'll always be able to return home? It's a story that you're telling of yourself and of your people. And I think that's the biggest thing for me when I'm talking to someone that's trying to navigate the space, is to reiterate to them, you're sharing a story of yourself, of your people, the journey that they've had to bring you here, because you don't just represent yourself, you actually represent their journey and all the effort and work they've done to allow you to be here now. And I think that's really important for people to understand that no matter what creed, what colour, what religion, we each have a story, and we're able to find common ground in that story. So, yeah, just knowing the context, I guess you'll be hosting the situations and therefore leading the groups, and getting them to, feel safe. As a person that's not native to New Zealand, I guess, let's make it easy. Like, let's just talk about yourself to start off with. What's your story? So when in Māori exchanges, it's rude for us to say, "Who are you?" It's rude. So instead, we get around it by going, "Where are you from?" As in, where are your people from? What's your sacred land? So I guess that could be. I'm totally going off the cuff here. I'm just going off what is coming up for me in my heart, and what I've done in the past, is identifying that first nuance. Is we don't ask directly who you are, we ask where you're from, and that naturally answers every other question that will come from, identifying oneself and sharing where they come from and their life journey and so on and so forth. There's a really beautiful way for non-Indigenous to connect to the land here without upsetting Indigenous or Māori. And after this too, I can email you like these templates for anyone. Anyone can follow them. But yeah, it gives a way for people to connect to the land without claiming it as their Indigenous ancestor or Indigenous, without stepping on the toes of the Indigenous and claiming it the same way that they would. But yeah, I guess with what you've shared with me so far, it's a story. If you sat there and gave me facts, I probably wouldn't be as entertained, right? But when you're saying, well, actually, like, this is how I've come to be here and what resonated with me and what I've found out so far, it's that emotional level to it, an emotional layer. So I guess what I was thinking of before, was that if I can't, you've given it to me already, but if you were to write like a short story of who you are, and that can easily be translated into those templates that I'll send you. If that's something that you'd want to give, if you want to give those templates to people to get them to start sharing, no problem at all. It's totally cool. Like, I think it's keeps them safe. They're not getting thrown like this challenge of, you have to introduce yourself in the context of another language and another culture that you've probably never have had anything to do with, and you have 3 minutes to do that. Right? Ready? Go.
Yeah.
Man, that's going to like completely scare people, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know how the workshops are run, but just what's coming up is that maybe there could be just 2 templates in front of people. They can literally get up, if they feel comfortable to say it in Māori, great. If they aren't comfortable to say to Māori, but they want to say the translated version of what's in Māori, great. You're still honouring the context of how we do things in our culture. You're still honouring that exchange and the way that it's dealt with. I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and I've put you on the spot because actually I had my conversation with Brock Martin to help me with my Australian origins, and he said we should be recording this. I'm like, oh no, Brock. So I didn't actually plan on recording this, and I feel like that I mentioned to Brock it would be awesome to get the three of us on a call because we all just speak the same language.
Right.
And yeah, I kind of approached you with, can you help me with my New Zealand roots and describing and honoring that, and me wanting to get it right, not hurting or harming anyone. And that's where I felt really safe to speak to you about it, was because we talked about the layers and how it's kind of like all the same, is that we want to get it right no matter whether it's about honoring culture and color, etc. And I know there's so much more that you've got to share beyond this. So and the story, I'm just all about the story and the emotion. I don't want this to be a piece of homework of like, I just want to say who is my mother and where is she from and where am I from, etc. And this process, it does scare me. And so I'm taking the steps to explore this, and I have been very ignorant around it.
I think I feel really the word is aroha, like in which people take the word aroha and they say, oh, that means love, and it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper. When people say I feel aroha, so when you say that it's really scary and it's really like I've been ignorant, I don't look at it that way. A lot of people, they're still on that personal journey of trying to acknowledge that they need to do work, let alone are doing the work. And I think these conversations come up about, well, actually, who am I? Where am I standing right now? Oh my gosh, what have I not seen in front of me for the last how many years? And it's an awakening, right? It's coming into consciousness, and that happens no matter where you are and who you are. And you just happen to be lucky, us standing here on our land with us. How lucky we are that you're going through the process. And I really believe that anyone that goes through that, they're supposed to be exactly where they are when they suddenly open up. They're exactly where they need to be. Hence, just be kind to yourself. I think that's the biggest thing. When anyone wants to talk about and dive into these layers about who they are in a cultural context of Māori, be kind to yourself, because there's a whole heap of things going on here. Self-reflection and finding out who we are, man, that's some hard work. It's really emotional. It's really deep. It's really vulnerable. It brings up a whole heap of things. It makes us realize our triggers, what we don't know about ourselves, what we realize about ourselves that isn't so pretty, isn't so nice. Then, we've got to step back into our families and find out what their skeletons are. Again, another process altogether. And then on top of that, we're trying to be respectful to Indigenous or First Nations and add their cultural context onto it that we don't know about. There's so much going on there. And so I think the biggest thing is kindness. Just always kindness to yourself. Anyone that's in a privileged position like this, where I feel very privileged to be talking about this with you, because I'm still an infant in this space. As long as they're coming from a place of kindness and holding space for that discovery, I think that's the most important thing. And I just want to make that clear to you, because I love what you're doing and I really appreciate that.
Well, we talked about this as well, is that you're coming from a place of kindness, but not everyone will.
Not everyone will. No, that's right. And I know what it's like to, be the puppy dog with a wagging tail going, I'm so excited, I want to jump into this space. And then there's people that bat you away. And that's their own stuff. And I think that's whenever I've spoken to someone or try to help them through and navigate through, that's the first thing I'll say. I'm not the be all and end all. I'm just telling you what I know. I'm the way I see it, and the lens I look through. But when other people, and this is with anything, but from a cultural space, when you get other, I'll say older Māori women, because that's been my biggest challenge, as older Māori women who may or may not be in touch with their Māori world or their identity, but funnily enough have had very similar reactions, very strong reactions to me. And I've realised that I am triggering them because I'm in my generation, a privileged space of being allowed to discover who we are in the cultural context, of being able to speak our language, not be punished for it. There's still work to do, but it's not as hard as the work that my mother's generation would have had to do, or her mother before her. So I think once we seek understanding, and we spoke about that, once we all seek understanding about why people are reacting that way to us, we realize it's about them. It's not actually
Yeah.
about us. So yeah, anyone that goes on this journey, I think that's the biggest thing. Kindness, kindness, kindness for yourself, for the person that you may have coming at you because they're upset or they're triggered by the journey you're on. Kindness, kindness, kindness. It's just
Mm.
preface kindness. But yeah, with the discovery and everything you shared with me, it's emotional. You know, it's not supposed to be superficial. It's supposed to be it's supposed to reveal everything about you to yourself, not to anyone else. It's to you. Um, it's supposed to connect you with your ancestors. Um, it's supposed to give you a deeper connection to the land you're standing on and to those that are custodians of it. Whole heap of things are going to be happening in this process.
Mm.
That people may not even be able to they may not have the words to describe the feelings that are going to come up for them, and that's completely okay. It's completely
Mm.
understandable. Um, but yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, that if I was encouraging, if I was in, the position that you're going to be in, and it's such a challenging position for you to be in, and I adore you for that. Is just encouraging the people to think, okay, what is your story? What's important to you? Um, when you look around you at the land around you, what landmarks speak to your soul, speak to your heart? Um, those questions might be too deep as well. So it could be, what river do you like kayaking down? What
Yeah,
lake do you
this,
like swimming in?
this is what I liked about how you described it. And actually, I'm not facilitating the
Oh yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
There is someone else who
that's
I'm bringing in to facilitate the conversation. But after I spoke to you, I was like, oh, it's like I should get Jodie into this as well because
yeah,
you have your own story and your own perspective
yeah,
about it as well. And
yeah,
also because there's this lady is not from or doesn't live in New Zealand,
yeah, yeah,
and you do live in New Zealand, and I've got a lot of New Zealand clients. So
yeah,
um again, it's like, oh, you're both coming at it from different angles and it's not
yeah.
right or wrong. She's
It's
opened doors for me.
pluralism.
Yeah.
There's no one's right, no one's wrong. It's just seeing the thing from different angles. You
Yeah.
know, it's a bonus. I think it's a real
And after
bonus.
we had our conversation, which, we only met last week.
I know.
So you're friends with my husband Gav, and then
Yeah,
we just hit it off and spoke for hours.
yeah.
And I then went and recorded a video for my groups who I'm
Oh,
inviting into this inclusivity talk to say,
awesome.
this is where I'm stuck, but
Yeah.
now my doors are opening up to new people. And yeah, I feel like we're
Oh,
going to be friends for a long time.
oh, yeah. No, again, I walked away from the conversation going, you go. I said this to you that night, that it's like, yep, book launch, Gav's awesome, great. So nervous by myself, don't know anyone, da 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 da. And I came away from that like, thank you, universe. So cool, mission. And now I'm like, it was only a week ago. I've found a
Yeah.
friend and a sister, and I'm always grateful for that. It's supposed to happen. I really do. I always believe in that everything's supposed to happen, and supposed to you're supposed to cross paths with people. So it's
Yeah.
deliberate, in my opinion. And of course, so if there's anything I could do in these situations to help people, I'm only an infant in this space, but
Mm.
I'm more than happy to try and fast track people's journey of discovery for them if it saves them the pain and suffering. I honestly believe that we all go through experiences and we take our learnings from that, and we do have some kind of responsibility to at least try and share and cut down someone else's suffering if we can. And
Mm.
I'm all for that. So yeah, with this space, what I'd encourage, I guess, is this: whatever resonates with the individual, if they want to go deep and really ask those deep questions of, well, what was important to your ancestors? Who are your ancestors? What was their journey? Where did they set their village up? No matter which country they're in.
Mm.
all those kind of deep questions, or from a very light-hearted angle. Well, okay, you're not Maori, you've moved here from Africa, whatever. Well, what's important back in Africa for you?
Mm.
Where did you feed your, what river did you go and fill up your water bottle from?
Yeah.
That's that river's important to you, and maybe it's because it was closest to you. Doesn't matter. That nourished, it could be
Yeah.
very practical reasons why that river was the river you went to, and that's fine. It could,
Yeah.
like Gavin, drawn to New Zealand, and then Tititia has been his moga now that really speaks to him and holds him close. Beautiful.
Mm.
There's so many. There's ways to keep people safe. There's ways to honor who they are, and there's different stages. They can do it at any stage. Still speak to who they are, what's important to them, honor the cultural context of Aotearoa, of New Zealand, without having to go too deep, without having to be too vulnerable. So many different levels there. It's
Yeah.
really exciting. And once I honestly, and I've seen it happen so much, I start people off at the top level of, okay, what's, tell me where you're from, as in, where do you live right now? I live in Wanaka. Okay, cool. So you're going to say, no Wanaka aho. I'm from Wanaka. Sweet. Next question. What mountain do you look out your window to? Oh, I look out to Aspiring, to Titia. I went, great. So Aspiring is your mountain. Ko Titia Te Maunga. Amazing. And they've sooner or later they've answered all the questions, and they go, actually, now that you say Aspiring, there was this mountain back at home in Wales. Tell me about that mountain. And it's an organic process. And
Mm.
that's actually what I think would be good in that space, is for them to realize that, okay, this is an exercise, but as things come up for you, as I start questioning you and think, okay, we're looking at where you are now. Yeah, okay, I'm talking about where I am now, but actually there's this other place back home, wherever home is, that means something to me, and bang. As soon as you start those conversations, as soon as they start offering a little bit more of themselves, we've won. Because it's
Yeah.
about connection.
And it's
We've
the
won.
layers of like you start here, don't
Yeah.
expect it to be like deep because again, didn't plan that we were gonna record this. I don't know if it's gonna make
Yeah.
it to the podcast because I've got vacuuming
All good.
happening in the background. But I will get you to introduce yourself in a minute. But I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
I am way off saying it in Māori because even my Australian accent, I was like Maori. Even Violet gets into
All
me.
good.
She's like, you don't say it right.
Oh, learning. It's all a journey.
Yeah, yeah. But maybe I'll get there one day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I haven't been able to bring in the pieces of Australia or as I said, the Yolngu family. And it's
Yeah.
funny because, you talk about like being a soul sister, whereas
Yeah.
I discovered talking to Brock, who I've had a connection with for a few years now, that he is within my adopted Yolngu family,
Wow.
that he is my wawa, my brother. And I'm like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Thanks.
yeah, yeah. So
So
funny.
cool.
But
So cool.
so I did ask you, I was like, Jodie, I just want to listen to how do you describe yourself? Because again, it was so much energy comes through, even though I don't understand a
Yeah.
word of it.
Yeah.
So can I get you to introduce yourself? And because we rolled into this and I know about you, tell us a little
Yes.
bit
Yeah.
about yourself as well.
Of course. Of course. What I'll do is I'll do the same thing I did on the night when we first met, and just introduce myself from my cultural context of Māori, and then I'll just give that brief translation about what I said.
Mm.
Because yeah, I think it sums me up really nicely in where I'm at the moment. So, uh, ko waio, ki te taha o tōku ure toi, ko tongariro te maunga, ko taupo te moana, ko tūwharetoa te iwi, ko te aroa te waka, ko te hiohio te tangata. Ka huri au ki te taha o tōku whare tangata, te taha o tāna pāpa, ko panekire te maunga, ko waikare te moana, ko mātātua te waka, ko ngai tūhoi te iwi, ko te kuha te marae. Ka huri anō ki te taha o tōku mātua whāngai, te taha o tōku pāpa, no Ngāti Pākehā ia, ki te taha o tōku māma, no tūwharetoa raukawa whakatohia me Ngāti Parau ia, ko Jodie Treanor tōku ingoa. So going back into an English context, I guess, my name is Jodie Treanor. We always introduce ourselves naturally with who we are and our names. What I said in Māori was that I have a number of different sides, a number of different ancestors that feed into who I am and who's standing in front of you now. via Zoom. So I started off with my birth father. He's from a tribe called Tuwharetua, which is in central North Island, Lake Taupo, for anyone that just wants that geographical reference. The mountain that those people look to is Tongariro. The river, or the body of water that we consider that nourishes us is Lake Taupo itself. The boat that brought our people over is a boat called Te Arawa, and Tuwharetua is the tribe, and the chief of that tribe is, at the moment, Tumu Te Hiuhiu. On the other side of me, my birth mother, and I went on her father's side. Again, we go along the male line as the dominant line in our ancestry. And so her father is from a place called Tuhoi, geographical reference, Waikare Moana, which is southeast of Lake Taupo. Beautiful, dense forest, a lot of history there. And the marae there that I've just recently connected with is called Te Kuha. Now, I'm also adopted. The father that raised me is a white man from New Zealand. He's a Pākehā person from the South Island on the West Coast. And then my mother, I touched very briefly on all different iwi that she's from. She's also from my main iwi, which is the reason why this particular woman was gifted me, because she connects to both my birth father and my birth mother through this tribe. And she also has other tribes that feed into who she is, which I brought them up. So Tuwharetua, Raukawa, Ngāti Porou, and Whakatohia. So that's just a brief introduction to the people that raised me and brought me into this world, nourished me, fed me, and held me. And that's just a beginning layer. That's just an example. And that is quite long, an introduction space. I guess we call it whakawhanaungatanga, when we're connecting with each other. And whakawhanaungatanga, whānau is family, ngā is plural, and tanga is the action of. So the action of making your family bigger is what we do when we're introducing ourselves. We're trying to connect with as many people in the room as possible. It's like a game. Yeah. So that's just, that's a brief version of who I am and what brought me here. The landmarks that are important to me, that nourished me and my ancestors before me. So
yeah. Oh, interesting. I love it. And I remember hearing this and then remembering, oh, I haven't been adopted in the sense that you have, or what we would understand as adoption, but it just reminded me of like being adopted into this Yolngu family that is just so extensive.
Yeah.
And this is where hopefully I can get you and Brock on a podcast together to talk about this, because I also love how you said, it's not necessarily separate, and the two of you I think will get along really great. I also heard you would describe your mother but the father line, and I know the way that in this inclusivity training is that it's all about the female line, so mother, grandmother, great grandmother.
Yes.
But then and it was interesting because I've never asked my mum, and my mum said, oh, I don't know what my grandmother's name is. My mother never told me. So I never knew my grandmother's name. I just knew her as Popo, and she passed away when I was 3, so I didn't really know her. So it's interesting delving into this. And something else came up, but I can't remember right now.
Okay.
So just, hearing how you describe the father line, but then this training that I've done, which is a training, is like, she wants us to go to the female line. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too, because this is something that's come up recently with the woman in my biological family, my birth mother and her mother, my grandmother. There's a word called te pairu, which means honouring the female line. So there's a lot of debate at the moment between different academics around how much European culture has impacted and put like a patriarchal expectation on our cultural context. So it's highly debated at the moment. My grandmother will argue that women are just as capable to stand on their own and honour that te pairu, the female line. And from that side of my family, we do. My grandmother is from it's a very rare line here in New Zealand that connects to the only female mountain in Aotearoa, which is a special thing in itself. But again, it's really it's important to me, I guess, to still honour that line because she stands on her own and her mother before her and her mother before her and da 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 da. And they did a lot for Māori women. They really brought a lot of things to fruition, I guess, that were the dreams of their ancestors and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's as much as we go by the patriarchal lines, I
Mm.
think personally, after hearing this story from my birth mother and her mother of how important it is to also honour the woman, which let's be honest, humanity, we are the ones that bring humanity into play through our bodies and through our capabilities. So I really like that. I really like hearing that about the honouring the female line and that inclusivity training. I think it's
Yeah,
great.
and I know it feels quite wrong for some people as well. It's like, why would
Yeah,
I not
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the father line? What
Yes.
is the female mountain?
Oh, Pihanga, Pihanga, Pihanga. It's in a central plateau. Um, she sits in front of Mount Tongariro. So if you look at a map, you'll see
Mhm.
she's like this little petite hill. She's not really a mountain, but we call her a mountain because she deserves that honor. And yeah, I guess the story with that's quite an important story too. So depending on which tribe you listen to, um, the patriarchal line of Tu Wharetua, the short version goes like this: called Pihanga, and the male mountains around her.
Can you just start again? I just lost you.
Okay,
I don't know if the recording got
okay,
it. You said the story
yep.
starts like this.
Okay, the story starts like this. So there was this beautiful maiden mountain called Pihanga, and surrounding her were these male mountains: Tongariro, Putawaki, and Taranaki. And there another one in there. They were the main ones. They all fought for her affections, and like blokes do, they had a big punch up. They fought over her. Taranaki lost, so in his grief, he took off to the west and left now what is called the Whanganui River. Putawaki escaped to the east and sits far enough away from Tongariro, but close enough he can still gaze upon Pihanga, and Tongariro won and is now that his maiden. That was the story we were raised with from a very male perspective, of we won the maiden. When you listen to my grandmother's line, who is the direct descendant from that female mountain, the story is actually about Pihanga being the matriarch. She was suddenly ready to have children. So she did what we call a karanga. She called out and put her intentions out to the winds. She had all these suitors approach her and say, "We'll be the father of your children. Pick me, pick me, pick me." She chose Tongariro. She was the one, not Tongariro chose her. She was in the place of power. And she said, out of all of you suitors, I will choose you. So, sorry, there was another mountain. Tauhara was another mountain as part of the battle. Sorry, there were four mountains. There you go. But yeah, and I was like, there was another mountain in there somewhere. With my grandmother, she's really particular about that story, saying, no, we were in charge of that story. We were in charge of that narrative. The women were in charge, not these men telling us that we're going to have children. And it's a very yeah, it's a contentious issue.
Well, I was telling you about how I was Googling things and it's like, do I trust this source or this source? But you've just said, it's the same sort of,
Pluralism.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's just different
so many different
stories. It's
stories.
the same thing.
Yeah,
And you
just
follow
looking at
whatever you want to follow.
yeah, and I remember like when I was teaching high school kids about something different altogether within the Māori context, but just having a cup on the table and there was a red dot on one side, a blue dot on another side, a green one on this side, and everyone's looking at this cup from different angles. None of them are wrong. They're all
Mm,
correct. And we have to, I think, in our culture, it's neither right nor wrong. It's just a different perspective and a different lens. And the same applies for introducing yourself or yeah, any context. It's just really accepting that, oh, okay, that's the way you see that. Okay. I see you, I acknowledge you. And I think
yeah.
it seems a lot easier that way.
Yeah. Actually, I just remembered what came up in my mind before is because you've been friends with Gav for a long time. I've definitely heard your name, but finally,
Oh,
10 years later, we make a
oh
connection.
that's nice.
And then you had some involvement in his book around translating some words into Māori.
Yes.
And yeah, he has had this whole past life regression where he feels very connected, like New Zealand is his spiritual home. And you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, you're
Yeah.
like this redheaded Irishman. But yeah, I totally like, I
Yeah.
love that story. And
Yeah.
then I went to him and I was like, oh, I had all these like amazing conversations with Jodie and she's going to help me with
Mm.
this thing. And I already told him about this sacred inclusion training and how I really struggled with it. And then I'm telling him 3 months later about our interaction. He's like, yeah, you're Pepeha.
Yeah. Oh,
Why
like,
you help me?
was that when I needed that?
Yeah. And then you sent me a great video on a
Yeah.
Pepeha because I'm like, I don't
Yes.
even know if I'm gonna watch the right thing on a Pepeha.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but your description is slightly different to that one. And it's the
Yes. Yes.
opportunity for me to go, I don't get that because I could just go, these are the training steps and this is what I have to
Yeah.
do. But most
Yeah.
of the time why we interact with people is so that we can go, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me in another way?
Yeah. Yes, 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 for sure. And I guess that's that too. Like when I first saw that video, I was like, wow, I've never heard that description before. But it's not wrong. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It's just such you just become richer. The tapestry becomes richer and more colourful when you see from other people's perspectives too. And that's the image I have in my head is this massive, huge rug, this huge mat where you step back and go, wow. And then someone else goes, oh, look at it from this angle. And you look at it from another angle, oh my God, it's even more beautiful. And you're taking in all these different parts, and it's a new learning every day. It's a new landscape every day. It's a new vision every day. And what a wonderful way to live where you know something else is going to wow you every day.
Mm,
That's honestly how I see it. And when I hear someone's perspective on even a word, even one word, like some words that come up like whakapapa or pepeha, the amount of different translations I've heard about those words, I'm like, man, that
yeah.
one word means all these different things to different people. And it just makes it richer.
Yeah.
I don't see the need for debate over it anymore. I see the need for robust discussion, understanding how it came to be this explanation.
Yeah.
Um, but it just gives you such a deeper understanding, a wider perspective on things, and
Yeah.
I really love it.
It
But
happens in
nothing's,
English words
yeah,
as well. It's like, well,
yeah,
your context around that word versus mine is very different.
yes, exactly, exactly. So I mean, it's neither wrong nor right, and I just keep thinking of anyone that would be engaging in the space for the first time. It's so important that they know that, that
Mm,
it's neither wrong nor right. And as we know better and as we learn, we do better. And
mm,
we progress, and that introduction I gave to you when I first said who I was, gosh, that's grown over a period of like 2 years. I was too shy or too worried about upsetting someone that I'll just say, oh, ko Jodie Treanor tōku ingoa no tū whare toa me tū hoia hau. And that's, I'm from these two iwi, and that's all you're going to know about me.
yeah. Yeah.
And that's all I'd be willing to give, which is totally fine. It's totally fine. And now, as I've explored it a bit more, found out what really sings to my heart from those different places, um, discovering how many fond memories I have of all my parents that have held me. It's just become deeper and richer and more extensive. And I think that will naturally happen for anyone engaging in the space, whether they're saying who they are in English or in Māori or in Chinese or in whichever dialect from the Aboriginal culture. Man, it doesn't matter. It's how much are you willing to offer about yourself and what space. That will change every day. Those boundaries would change every day depending on who you're in front of. Oh, just so many dynamics there. You know,
Mm,
it requires kindness to oneself.
yeah.
Um, to share that. It's a massive process, huge process.
Yeah. And I so appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. Um, shall we dive in?
Yes, let's go. Let's go.
So, do you want to ask me questions? Because it's interesting when you mentioned Tongariro, and I was like, I did live in Wellington, and
Yes,
well, actually, I'm just going to kick off the story. Should I kick it off?
go for it. Yes, please. Story.
Okay,
Where are you
because
from?
well, I'll just start the New Zealand part, and then
Yeah.
maybe when we all get together, maybe I'll be
Yeah.
able to introduce myself on all these levels.
Oh.
Um, But at first I was like, I'm just going to deal with Wanaka. I definitely feel like Wanaka's my home. But then when you mentioned Tongariro, it's like, well, how did I get to Wanaka? Was I moved to Wellington, and it was actually my ex-boyfriend who was an osteopath wanted to move to Queenstown, and I was from
Yeah.
Melbourne City. I was like, I'm not into ski fields and outdoor
Yeah.
stuff. And I was like, let's move to Wellington. Let's go to the city. And I ended up getting the job that he wanted. And
Yeah.
then it all sorted itself out. And then the first year I got introduced to skiing. And I went up to Owakuni town where
Yeah.
Mount Ruapehu is, and I would ski on
Yes.
the Turoa side.
Yeah.
And I was hooked. Like I have such an addictive nature.
Yeah.
And then that started my journey on, oh, I want to try ski patrolling. And I've got to get good enough to ski to be able to get into the ski patrol course, which is held down in Wanaka.
Yes.
And so Ruapehu, Owakuni, ended up buying a share in a ski lodge because I was going up there so much
Awesome.
and so dedicated.
Awesome. Yeah.
And then I found myself, I got into the ski patrol course, I got good enough at skiing, and I moved down to Wanaka, which is, I was like, snow is my happy place. It can solve anything.
Yeah.
And I ended up meeting Gavin, who's
Yes.
how we're connected. And we went away, but we always knew we wanted to come back to Wanaka.
Yeah.
So we moved back. That was 2011 and came back seasonally and then permanently moved back in 2016. And honestly, we had about $10,000 and that all got chewed up in the move and setting up some new businesses. But as
Yeah.
soon as we hit Wanaka, everything just flowed and like exploded. And
Yeah.
it was like, this is such a good move. And we often share that because it didn't make sense to move back. We could have stayed in Melbourne, keep on making money, keep on being miserable, etc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so everything exploded. And then I guess I'll just fast forward. Oh no, in there, what happened? Before we had Violet, so Violet's 7 and almost 8 now.
Yeah.
I really did get into the mountaineering with Gav, and I would climb mountains with him. And there's been a few, but one of the most significant ones was the southwest ridge of Mount
Yeah.
Aspiring. And so when
Yeah.
you said you get to connect with a mountain and a river, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, Mount Aspiring's going to be my one. And
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's Gav's one as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, he hasn't shared his Pepeha with me.
Yeah. Get him to
I
share
will.
that with you later on. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we've climbed the Southwest Ridge together, and that was a challenge. And it's funny because it's the only picture in his book, Seeking the Light,
Yeah.
that is not from the journey of climbing a 3,000-meter peak.
Yeah. It's from a very personal space, that one.
Yeah, and that's when we climbed it that he took that photo. I was like, oh, that's going to be my mountain.
Yes.
It is like the kind of the iconic mountain
Yeah.
in Wanaka.
Yes.
And then water source is, well, I feel like Lake Wanaka would be my water source.
Yeah.
And then I think that's as far as I got. I was asking you, I was trying to Google things. It's like,
Yeah.
heard a lot about Ngaitahu. Is Ngaitahu, like, is it a tribe? Is it a clan? Is it,
Yeah.
are they original custodians? What's the difference between custodian and steward? And then that will summarize it enough.
Yeah, absolutely. There was so much, as you were sharing that story, especially when you're talking about the South Ridge, you and Gavin climbing that part. The term, it's from this really beautiful song actually. But there's a phrase that goes, ki te tihi o tōku manawa. So tihi means the top of, as referring to the top of a mountain. Manawa is heart. And what you were describing there about that connection you have, yes, with that mountain, the South Ridge with you and Gavin, the image that come up for me about you and Gavin and sharing that love, especially in that particular place, and now it's in the book, that phrase come up for me, ki te tihi o tōku manawa. So he's the peak of your spiritual mountain, I guess, within your heart, of who's claimed that peak within you, who owns that space within you, who you've dedicated that part of your heart to, is to him. It's just such a it's a line that I'm like, I've just plastered you and Gavin with this line now of, sorry, that's probably too deep for a potential podcast, but
no, it's all right. I go deep in my podcast. I'm putting myself in a vulnerable position here.
But that line, I was just like, it's just such it's difficult to relay a feeling, but I know that if we were standing in front of each other, you just totally feel what I'm like. It's a really warm feeling. Anyway, that description that you've given me and that you've shared, that's what's brought up, has come up for me, is like, oh, that line, from that. It's a love song. It's from, and I'll share that with you on a separate. I'll send a message to you. But
Yeah.
it's this is the feeling. This is what I'm talking about now. It's this is what happens when people share who they are. There's something about each other's story that we go, oh man, you feel something, you're moved by something. And that's something. I'm a real, what do you say? I'm almost like an addict when it comes to this feeling. I'm almost like, this is what I love about connecting with people, because there's
Yeah.
something of everyone's story that pulls my heart out of my chest and makes me go, oh, amazing. And
Yeah.
I wish sometimes I could bottle that feeling and give it to people just before they're about to engage in this space and go, this is a little bit of what you'll feel when you engage in this space, and get everyone addicted to it.
Mm.
They can feel, it's called modi, it's called energy. Feel the modi of what happens in this connecting space. But going back to when
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, I love it when people get messages, and
yeah,
again, it's just this perfect example of there is no set way.
yeah, there isn't,
Yeah.
there's definitely processes, but processes are fluid concepts as well, where they can roll with the energy, roll with the modi. They can change depending on what's going on in the room and in that space and what energy is happening, and that's a beautiful thing. But when you're talking about aspiring being your mountain, beautiful. There's a story behind that. Like Wanaka being your water source, beautiful. There's a story behind that. There's also a way to say it too. So if you were Māori, if you're from Ngāi so I wouldn't, even though I'm Māori, I'm not from that tribe. I'm not from Ngāi. They look at Aoraki as their main, like their supreme mountain.
Which is Mount Cook for people who.
Yes, Mount Cook. Um, for I'm just trying to think about which is a better way to explain this. I'll give an example. I remember being in a training session for work, and we all had to introduce ourselves in a Māori context. We had a template up on the board called core space tōku maunga. What is your mountain? Core space tōku awa or moana. What is your water source? Core space tō kāinga i nāianei, I think is what it said. What is your home now? So that was the template that was put in front of you. And I remember it was another Irishman, funny enough. He got up and he said it with so much love and so much energy. He says, ko auraki tōku maunga. And I was like, oh, wow. I looked around the room and there were some people from Ngāi and they were so offended that he had in the same context of the way we look at our mountains, because they're this is going to be difficult for people to understand this, but for some people they're mountains. For us, they were living beings. They live, they breathe, they are above us, they are more important than us. And so when we say ko tongariro tōku maunga, ko tongariro te maunga, I'm looking at as, in my head, I see an old man. I'm saying that old man is my ancestor. That is absolute supreme over me, keeps me safe, keeps me grounded. When Ngāi heard this really lovely man say, ko auraki tōku maunga, he's claiming it in the same energy space that they claim it as, and that didn't sit well with them. The reason why I bring up that example is because when I worry about people feeling safe and worry about people using the same context, I don't want them to be in a vulnerable position where someone then comes at them and makes them feel like they've done something wrong. It's not about that.
Mm.
So I like to give people a choice about how they say it, especially if they're not Māori or if they're not from that particular tribe. There's two ways you can say it. You can say it in the standard, ko such and such tōku maunga, ko such and such tōku water source, ko such and such tōku ancestral home, da 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 da. But there's this beautiful, I can't remember who it was written by, but it's almost like a poem, and it goes something like this. Ka titiro ake au ki te tihi o maunga auraki. Now that can translate into a whole heap of different things. The basic translation is, I look up to the top of my favourite mountain, Mount Cook. Ka whakarongo au ki te karanga, ki te tangi o te awa whanganui. I listen and remember the roar of the Whanganui River. The beauty with Māori is that it can translate into so many different things. At the very least, it's poetic. At the very least. What that does, and it goes on, obviously, it's a longer one, but what the second template that I've just shared a little bit with you, what it does, it still speaks to the importance that someone feels about aspiring, about Lake Wanaka. It still speaks to that love that they have for those important landmarks without taking on the sense of custodianship or guardianship that Ngāi Tahu or the relevant iwi to those places would take on.
And so was that down to how it was worded?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Because just in this context, that was fresh in my brain and maybe for people listening,
Yeah.
is how did he describe it that people took offense to, and how would you do it instead? And then I want to find out, how did you navigate that?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. So the very basic pepeha, and we refer to it as te reo rangatira, the language of old, because there's transliterations now and there's new age speakers with a whole heap of different words that makes no sense to my grandmother, for example, who her language is te reo rangatira. Her language is from the old days, traditional Māori language. If you hear someone stand up and say ko waio, and it usually starts with ko, there's a hint there, ko, ko, ko such and such tōku maunga, ko such and such tōku awa, moana, river, lake, ko such and such tōku iwi, ko, maunga, water source, awa, moana, iwi, tribe. That's old school context. That's claiming something and saying that you have blood connections to those landmarks, to those tribes. That's the only caution that I'll give to people, to say, hey, if you're staunch enough to take on those conversations and seek understanding from someone that may come and challenge you about why you're using that template, go hard, 100%, claim the space. All it's going to do is teach you more.
Yeah.
It might bruise you a little bit. It might force you to grow a little bit. No harm in growth, right? But man, good luck, because that's a staunch conversation. Staunch conversation. But then there's the other side of it, and it was specifically written only recently. I think it was only written in the last 10 years. And this was, I can't remember their name, but he was a tutor, and he felt a lot of sympathy for people like me. So I was learning reo Māori down in the South Island within Ngāi Tahu context, but I'm not Ngāi Tahu. He felt sympathy for people like yourself who were going, what is this space? I want to engage, but I want to be careful, which made him put pen to paper and write a template like the core template, but not the same. Doesn't have the same nuances. Hence let's call it a poem. Hence the poem that he wrote, or the template he wrote, which is poetic, which is emotional, which speaks to someone's connection to the land without taking on the same nuances as the core. And that's where that sprung from, was how can we give people a template to keep them safe while still allowing them to express their love for our Māori land? How do we do that? So it comes from a place of kindness. It comes from a place of absolute love.
Can you do the safe version?
Yes, yeah, for sure. Of course.
Or if you were to just speak it out, what's it like? I just want to hear it.
Yeah, okay, so I'll do it as if I'm talking about the South Island, because I do love the South Island, because my dad, who adopted me, and I really don't like the word adoption, by the way. I prefer the translation whāngai, which means the father that chose to hold me and chose to nourish me and care for me, whāngai. That word sits better with me. He's Pākehā. He hasn't got blood roots to the land. His roots are Irish
Yeah.
and Scandinavian. But yeah, I'll do the Māori version first and then I'll explain it
Yeah.
and how it translates for me. So, ka titiru ake au ki te maunga o Arana. Ka whakarongo au ki te tangi ki te waiata o whanganui awa. Kei whatarua tōku haukainga, ko Hanson tōku iwi. So the way this translates to me is, as a little girl, I used to look out my grandfather's window and look up to Mount Adam. My father used to hunt on that mountain. He used to bring us food back from that mountain. As a little girl, I remember listening to the Whanganui River. As we were going down there to go fishing, white baiting, I'd fill my water bottle up from there. I'll drink from that water. I'd swim in that water. I can still hear the roar or the sound of that river today. The place that I call my ancestral home and where I feel at my safest is Whatarua, or Wararoa, as the locals would say down there.
Yeah.
The tribe that held me and took me in and loved me and cared for me, although not my own, is the Hanson tribe, as in Hanson, Peter Hanson and his family.
Yeah.
So it's taking on important peaks and important water sources that Ngai Tahu are custodians of, referencing them, but acknowledging that I do not have a blood connection to those places the same way the local tribe does. But my God, the love I have for those places, it's obvious.
It's so good to know this. Can I just, because my brain's getting caught up in this, and I don't know, I need to see the written words and I don't know how to pronounce, so I'm sorry if I offend, but
no,
like the original, the traditional version was coal.
Yep. Yeah, core, like apple core. Core.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then what is this version was K, maybe?
It's called he whakapakanga mihi. It's a long mouthful, which I'll write down for you.
Yeah.
He whakapakanga mihi. Mihi means introduction. Pakanga. How do I explain that word? Connection without claim, I guess, is the closest, not translation, interpretation. It's the closest interpretation that I have. Connection without claim. I love that place. It doesn't belong to me, but the depth of love I have for it, it's massive.
Yeah.
He whakapakanga mihi. I'll write it all down.
Yeah, and I think it'll be so good to see those two templates.
Yes. I'll send it.
I don't want to move you along, but
I know.
I do have to again, this is not planned. It's like, tell me my story, Jodie. But I just have to go and get an ultrasound for my ankle.
Right. Yes.
Probably because I'm going to cut my way down and get some sunshine. So I'm going to go in 15 minutes.
Yeah. You go whenever you're ready. And because you and I know already that there's so many different strands we can go on a tangent on, and those are just different podcasts on its own.
Totally.
I mean, I guess if there's a way to wrap it up, or if there's something that you want to close on, what would that be for you?
I would love for you to help me with my translation of how I would be introducing myself if I've gone through my Australian and Chinese roots and the Yolngu family that I was adopted into, and then now New Zealand, with Wanaka and Lake Wanaka, Tititea, Mount Aspiring, and Lake Wanaka. How to do that in English and in Maori.
Okay, that's quite a big question that deserves a lot of time and thought. So what I'd suggest is, because we're obviously in contact with each other anyway through Messenger, what I think would be a really good starting place, write a little bit of a story for me. From an emotional point of view, as in, I want a memory. I would love for you to bring the first fond memory that comes to your mind as you're thinking, I moved from here, or this is the tribe that held me. Tell me about a memory of there. Was there an uncle or a friend or an auntie or a nan figure that mind when you're talking about the the clan or the tribe in Australia that took
Yep,
you
yep,
on,
yeah.
stuff like that. It's all good to say, yeah, this tribe they took me on. There's no emotion there. No, it's kind
And
of just like,
you know what my brain's doing is
yeah,
going, well, I am going to introduce my Australian origin, and then I am separating out the New Zealand part. So
perfect.
when you ask me for my story, I feel like
Mm,
it's my story of like real Pehu and then
right.
Wanaka.
It's what you were when you were telling me that story. I was like,
Yeah,
this is I'm connecting with that, and that's
yeah,
to me. I think that's an organic. What you offered was organic, and it
yeah.
was real. So I think stick with that, um, and then we can start putting a structure around it from there. Having Māori wherever you want to put that Māori, that he whakapakanga mihi part, the
Mm,
opposite to core mihi, we can
mm,
put it somewhere and we can honor all those sides of you. I think
mm.
that's um, and even maybe if there's a way that you can use the Aboriginal dialect somewhere,
Oh my gosh.
even if it's
Yeah.
a word, something, I'd encourage it. If that sits with you and with your family there, how beautiful would that be? But I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about going, wow, how are we gonna turn this something that you've taken for granted that's, oh yeah, this is just what happened to me. It's a story and it's such a beautiful
Mm,
turning this into into poetry. I really
mm,
love those opportunities. So yeah, that's what I'd encourage you to do is what you told me, share it
yeah,
with me and write.
yeah.
Um, we can put some structure around it, some different ideas about where you can go and how you can do that, and
Mm.
then you choose from there about how you're going to structure it. I'm just going to give you the templates and you choose from there. I think is the best way to
Yeah,
do it.
interesting because I think that I will do the basic version when I
Oh,
play around with it in a few weeks' time is when we're having this
yeah,
conversation. And then
yeah,
there's going to be like a longer version as well. So,
yeah.
um, could I run something by you that's just going through in my mind, knowing that this is just like the top layer
Perfect.
and I could go deeper, is that,
Yep,
my basic version would be that I live in New Zealand, I live in the town of Wanaka, and that
yep,
is the traditional name.
yep, yep.
So I've got
Yes, yeah.
questions of like,
Wanaka.
am I using the right
Yeah,
word?
yeah.
My mountain is Mount Aspiring to Tatea,
Yeah.
and my water source is Lake Wanaka.
Yes. Beautiful.
Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, and then I am interested to learn about the layers.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, I'm going to rote learn this accent, and
Yeah.
and
It's all
so then it wouldn't feel right to use it.
it's a journey. It's all just a journey and practice makes perfect. That's all it is. And sooner or later those words will roll off your tongue and it'll be second nature. And when
Yeah,
we get to that space, massive win. That's a massive win. But this is a win. The fact that you're
yeah,
willing to engage in
oh,
it,
yeah,
celebrate it, amazing. I'm grateful for it. But I will send you a translation through Messenger about what you've just shared with me, just so
yep,
you have a one to start off with,
yep.
and everything will grow from there.
I'd probably be comfortable using the word of mountain and water source. Moana.
Perfect. Yeah,
What is
yeah,
that movie? Like,
perfect.
no,
Yeah,
it's
my
okay.
wanna. Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Because it's familiar. But
Yes.
yeah, I'm really grateful for this conversation. I'm pretty sure I'll put it on the podcast because this is like the version of me that does not understand this. And
Yeah,
when I was sharing with my two groups of like, this is where I'm at and acknowledging that this may be where you're at. And some of you
yeah,
may not want to turn up because you don't do the homework, but just know I forgot to do the homework.
yeah,
I probably wouldn't have turned up because it's like, oh, I don't have time to explore this. But
yeah,
this is
yeah.
the time for me to explore it. And yeah, I just like you resonate with is that this is just the same experience of a different version of something else happening in this human experience.
Okay.
Is
Yeah,
that I want to have like the big introduction, like what you've got, but the
yeah,
reality is I'm not there yet. So I've got to just start here in
yeah.
English.
With anything, right? With
Yeah.
anything. We don't just wake up and we're awesome at whatever we choose to be awesome at.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work. That's all it is. So, but yeah, it's a real privilege. I'm always grateful for these opportunities because it's cool to connect and I love it and I'm grateful for it. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh,
Honor.
I think you're a wealth of knowledge. So I feel like the next step we'll either do another podcast or we'll get Brock on board. And I know that the three of us will just be able to
Bye.
riff. Yeah, yeah, totally. And I do want to know though, I mean, tell us a little bit about what you did and what you do now, because my brain, whenever I meet someone, is going, oh my gosh, this is such a gift. And do you know how much people could use this? And Jodie, you should offer this as a service.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. I guess I'll go. I'll start what I'm doing now. So I'm studying law at the moment. But I've had a few different hats in my lifetime. Going back to when I met Gavin, for example, a lot of my work back then was adventure tourism, obviously in Franz Joseph Glacier Guides, and then I've had a lot of involvement in a lot of work with government agencies, and in this space of trying to help them start their Māori journey, help them engage in these spaces and feel safe about doing so. And I'm hoping with law that it can actually bring a lot more of our cultural practices and bring it onto the same level as legislation, as New Zealand law, what we know it today. So it's kind of, funnily enough, even though adventure tourism and law seem like two opposite worlds, the deeper story, which will be probably better to share another time, it all does connect. And I can see the pathway that's led me from adventure tourism right over to this space here. So at the moment, I'm not doing much of this, which is fine because I really do relish the moments where this happens, but have done this a lot in my past life right up until maybe the end of last year. So there's a very nutshell explanation. So
yeah, well, if we have any updates or you do end up being in this space or anything like that, I'll make sure I just put your details in the show notes.
no worries. It's
Yeah, thank
completely
you.
fine.
And I trust, like, there's other Jodies out there who are
Absolutely. Oh, yeah,
and
bigger and better.
trusting the timing.
Yeah, that's the timing exactly, and they'll come up as time goes by and as that growth happens. Right, people will step forward. The teacher will appear. Right, so
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful space. But I know I'm really aware of the time, and I don't want to make you late. So I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much. It helped me bring everything up too.
Yeah, well, you're speaking from your soul, you're speaking from your heart. So I am very, very grateful for this, Jodie.
Yeah.